Hey guys, Mr. T here. This is another video. This one is on inflation in the field of shares. So the idea of inflation is that the price of goods and services over time is always increasing. You may be familiar with this if you were doing general maths at the start of the year, but people coming from different subjects, this is your quick introduction to the idea of inflation. Inflation needs to always be considered for investments that take a long time, because if the price of everything is increasing, the profit you're going to make from an investment isn't going to matter so much. It's actually technically going to decrease, because let's say you're going to make $1,000 to buy something that was $1,000 in the first place, but if the price of that thing is increasing, the buying power of your $1,000 that you make will decrease over time. You won't be able to buy that thing that you wanted to in the first place because it's more expensive. So this is going to be important for us because we're considering how much money that you make on an investment, but if it takes time, we have to consider the effect on inflation. So what you're going to be doing in this kind of question is finding the real rate of return on an investment in shares that considers the effects of inflation on the total cost of buying the shares in the first place. So what are you going to need? You'll need to be able to use the following inflation formula, and this formula tells you the value of a certain amount of money once you've indexed it for inflation. So you're basically finding out, how much this money is worth after its value is increased over time due to inflation. So the index value is going to be PV, bracket 1 plus I to the power of n. PV is the amount of money being indexed. I is the inflation rate as a decimal, and n is the number of years that the amount is being inflated. And the second thing you'll need for this kind of question is the TVM Solver app on your graphics calculator. How do you access the TVM Solver app? You need to press the Apps button, select one Finance and press Enter, and then select one TVM Solver and press Enter. So those are things you need. Now we have to actually do the steps, because this is a quite involved question type. So to find the real annual rate of return on a share investment, you need to do the following. One, you need to find the total cost of buying the shares. So you do the same calculation that you would do in a buying the shares question to work out how much it costs to buy them. Number two, index the total cost of buying the shares. So the number that you find in one, you need to index it with inflation using the inflation formula. So the number that you get from answering part one of these steps, you need to put into this formula here to work out how much that money needs to be after inflation. Step three, after you've done that, find the total proceeds of selling those shares. So then you do a selling shares calculation, which you've done before. And then lastly, this is what you need to do in TVM Solver. So in TVM Solver, you need to enter this. N is going to be the number of years that's given in the question. I put a star here because the way this app works is you enter all of the different variables in, and then you highlight the thing that you're trying to work out and press alpha and enter, and it solves what it is for you. And I, in this case, I%, will tell us the real rate of return. So you leave that till last. Enter PV. PV is the indexed value of the total cost of buying the shares, but you need to leave it as a negative. So the number that you get from step one, after you index it in step two, that is what you put into PV on the TVM Solver on the graphics calculator, but you enter it as a negative. PMT, leave that at 0. FV, which stands for final value, you put in the total proceeds of selling the shares, which you got in step 3. PY and CY, you both leave them at 1. So once you've done all of that and you press alpha enter on the I% variable, the number that you get is going to be the real annual rate of return on the share investment considering inflation. You can literally write that as your answer statement after the number, but if it helps your thinking, you can also think of it as this answer is giving you the real percentage increase in the investment every year considering the effect of inflation. It's a whole bunch of words, a whole bunch of steps. We need to see that in practice. So here's your example here. I'm going to try something different with the videos and the calculator. Wish me luck, hopefully it works. So we've got buy 500 shares at $2.50 each, sell them at 2 years, sell them 2 years later for $3 each. So hopefully you make a profit there. Brokerage was a flat fee of $20 each time, and then inflation was averaging at 3% each year for the 2 years. So every year that this happened, the price of everything was increasing by 3%. So we need to consider that here to find the real return. So part A of the question, find the real annual rate of return on this share investment, and B, what other considerations might affect the real annual rate of return. We'll think about B after. So part A, find the real annual rate of return for this share investment. So we need to do those steps. First one was buying the shares. There's 3 parts to buying shares. Consideration is going to be the number of shares times by the price of those shares. So 500 shares times by $2.50 equals, I'll grab the calculator out. Bear with me. 500 times by 2.5. So the consideration is $12.50 for buying them. Brokerage is a flat fee for this question, so it's $20. No calculation required there. And GST, 10% in Australia right now, so 0.1 times by the service offered, which was $20 brokerage, so that's going to be $2. So when you're buying shares, they're all added because that's the total cost. So the buying the shares is going to be 2, 5, 6, 7, 2, 1. Total cost to buy. So that's the first step that I've given above. Step 2 was finding the indexed value. So indexed value, we're trying to work out how much 1272 would be worth, or the value of it, if 3% inflation occurs each year for these 2 years. So you use that formula. PV is the total cost of buying the shares, 1272, bracket 1 plus I is the inflation rate as a decimal, so 0.03 because it's 3%, and N, the exponent on the outside of the bracket, is the number of years, so it's 2. So bed mass, we need to work out what's in the brackets first. 1272, 1.03 to the power of 2. 1.03 to the power of 2 is that, times by 1272. That comes to approximately 1349.46 to 2 decimal points. So 1272 needs to grow to $1349.46 to keep its value after 2 years of 3% inflation. Alright, that leads us to step 3. We haven't even answered part A of this question yet because there's 4 steps to that. Step 3, we need to work out the selling of the shares. How much money would be made from that? So there's 3 parts to this consideration. It's 500 shares, and you sold them at $3 each. 500 times by 3. So you're going to make 1,500, but that's not the end of the story because you need to pay the brokerage and GST. So brokerage is $20 again. The same the transactions, you'll be given the question that it's going to cost $20, so you're going to minus it this time, minus 20, and GST is 10%, 0.1 times by the service provided, $20, so it's going to be 2 again. So 1,500 minus 20 minus 2, so that comes to 1478. So now that we've found the proceeds of selling, step 3 of the process, we need to do step 4, which is on the graphics calculator. So I'm going to try something new that I haven't tried before, and let's see if it works. So here I have a video within a video, sort of like a videoception. I wanted to be able to show you the calculator on the iPad video. So let's see how it works, showing the input of the numbers into TBM Solver. So step 4 of the process requires you to input some values that we've worked out into the graphics calculator, TBM Solver. So in the instructions above, I've told you n is the number of years that the process occurs, so it's for 2. We're solving for I%, so you leave that. PV is the amount indexed for inflation that the buying price needs to be as a negative. So you need to press this negative button in the bottom right corner of your calculator. Negative, not the take sign. $1,349.46 is the index value that we found. PMT remains at 0 because we're not making any payments. FV is going to be the proceeds of selling as a positive number, so 1478, and PY and CY remain at 1. Leave everything else. So now we solve for I%, and you do that by pressing alpha and the enter button to solve. So that is telling you that the annual real rate of return is 4.65% every year, in considering inflation. So now that we've done the calculate entry, you need to write your answer statement. You can't leave it at that. So therefore the real annual rate of return is 4.65%. 2 decimal places, of course, per annum. So that's how much of their buying shares investment they're getting back per year considering inflation. So the last aspect of this question was part B. What other considerations might affect the real annual rate of return? So I've asked this particular part of the question to get you to reflect on sort of some of the last things that we were doing, which was tax. You'll notice the government hasn't taken any tax off of it, like capital gains tax, but obviously everyone's earning an income, the government may take a portion of it. So this conveniently ignores their capital gains tax. So capital gains tax is one of the things that may affect the real annual rate of return. So capital gains tax may have a detrimental effect, so a negative effect, reducing the amount you earn, so therefore your percentage return would be smaller. Detrimental effect on the real annual rate of return. So a lot of these real money questions, where they ask you about what other thing may have an effect on the earnings, that sort of thing, usually the answer is going to be tax. So hopefully that helps you out with this particular idea, the inflation, considering inflation in the increase of an investment. This is probably the hardest maths that you'll have to do, this topic. It gets easier from here. I will see you in the next video.